Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. It's really weird speaking to you all because I can hear loads of background noise, but I hope all you lot can hear me. Oh, I've got some supporters here in the crowd, I'm very excited. But thank you for coming. Just to give a very quick intro, so I'm Hannah Monds, Managing Director of EMEA for Tagger Media, the world's leading influencer marketing platform. And I'm here with my lovely clients, Hotwire PR. We partnered together for many years now. And do you want to give yourselves a brief introduction just before we kick off with the questions?
Yeah, so my name's Paige. I have been an influencer specialist now for about 6-7 years. Working for Hotwire Global, we're a global PR and marketing consultancy working predominantly with tech brands. Tech kind of revolves around our life, so every brand has tech at the heart of it. And yeah, we're working with Tagger on our tool stack. Yeah, Inez?
Oh, is your microphone? Do you want my one?
Is this working now?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, I'm Inez, and I'm a data and insight specialist at Hotwire. So I'll work on anything from measurement, KPIs, anything data numbers related, dashboards. I'll be your go-to at Hotwire. Sam?
Hello. So I'm Sam. So I'm a brand communications director at Hotwire. Focus across both B2B and B2C. My big sort of focus areas around strategy, and particularly at the moment how we integrate data into our strategy development.
Brilliant, thank you guys. So we've got 15 minutes. We're going to cover off quite a lot in those 15 minutes. Luckily, I'm from Croydon, so I speak very quickly. We're going to kick off with the first question. So what criteria do you consider when selecting influencers for your clients' collaboration?
I kind of feel like this is a bit of an open-ended question. I don't think one criteria fits all. It's a case of the client that you're working with, the sector that they work in, and the type of representation that they want, and also what the objective is. So I don't ever go into a project with a criteria that's just utilised and regurgitated for every client. I think the key things are like engagement rate. Everybody says engagement rate, benchmarks, click-throughs. But ultimately, I think it's about matching the influencer up to a persona. So who is it that you're trying to speak to? Does that influencer match that persona, but does their audience data also match that persona? Great thing about Tagger is we will validate our influencers using your data so that we can, if the persona of that influencer physically looks like the person we're trying to target, or their values match up to the person we're trying to target, it doesn't necessarily mean that their audience is also matching that. So I think it is a case of not one criteria fits all, unfortunately, but I don't think you should ever be scared about that. The criteria should be collaborative. We will always go onto a call with a client and say, look, this is an example influencer that we have sort of mocked up based on this persona that we're trying to target. If you agree with this, we'll then go through and do the discovery phase, and we'll then look at the influencers, vet them, you do in-depth analysis and utilize the data that Inez provides so that we can use a core criteria that's actually just tailored to them and not just every client that we work with.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, anything to add to that at all?
No, I think I'll come on to speak about it more later, but we're really at the moment focusing on how we use the data to identify who that audience is, and particularly in the B2B world, what we're really trying to do is move beyond the typical way that we look at an audience as a job function and try and see them as full people. We know that they've got KPIs, we know that they've got internal pressures as a business, and it's very easy to go, oh, well, there's a CTO, so they must have X, Y, and Z pressures that we know about. But what we're really focusing on is how we can flesh that out to see them as a person, understand the pressures, the motivators, and then how we can engage them in a way that really resonates with them and really helps us cut through the noise in a very difficult environment. Yeah,
and that's a really good point, because I think we discussed this on our call before we were doing this panel, that a lot of people assume, or B2B clients assume, that influence marketing just isn't for them. And I think you guys do a really good job of actually changing that perception.
Yeah, I think at the moment, we're really focusing on how we can kind of get past that B2B formula. I think a lot of people who work in B2B comms here will have that sort of understanding that we do the round table, we do the white paper, we do the gated assets. We treat businesses and business-to-business PR very much as like a function that we push people through. At the moment, the environment's very difficult. So we saw some research recently from LinkedIn that usually they've got 5% of the accounts on their platform are actively in the market. Now, because of the environment we face, there's only 1% of accounts that are actually active. So it's incredibly hard to cut through the noise and pinpoint, like, how do we get to that 1%? And we need to do that by treating them as people, by being emotionally inspirational, There's some recent research from Wyndham and Thompson that shows that if you are inspirational as a brand, if you speak to B2B buyers like their people, you're 2.2 times more likely to be remembered. You're 5 times more likely to be the first brand of choice for them. So speaking to them as people really, really helps.
Yeah, and I think, like we said as well, the B2B audiences, etc., changed. They're not what people thought they used to be, which is like old 65-year-old white men.
Yeah.
No offence to anyone in the audience. Okay, let's move on. So how do you measure influencer campaign success and return on investment? Really important one.
So yeah, that's my baby. So I'm biased, but I do think that data needs to be involved in the process from the beginning. We need to understand what the KPIs are, fully go through the brief. The client might say we need to look at something, but the data might say otherwise, so we also need to educate them that way. But yeah, in terms of KPIs, it's very different to set metrics from a campaign. The objective is brand awareness, where impressions and influencer reach are going to be the main criteria, let's say. But to go to a campaign where it's all about engagement and conversions and sales and things like that.
I was going to just say, and let's face it, like every brand now has to justify every pound, euro, dollar that they invest in. And every day our client is saying, great, we want to integrate influencers in, but how are you going to prove that return on investment for us in advance of actually doing the campaign? We're having to really predict and utilize tools and data to predict what the outcome's going to be, because it comes with a hefty third-party cost usually.
That's why at Hotwire we have a product called Performance IQ, which is like a holistic view of how the whole performance is, or the campaign is performing. So we'll have APIs through the different channels we're using on that campaign. The client can see, we can see, which helps immensely on optimizing and making any change that we think it's necessary. It's live data. They can see from paid data. They can see organic from the influencers, like everything's in there. Also from website traffic, because, okay, we reach your consumer, we reach your audience, but what are they actually doing on your website? That's very important on a sales-led campaign. So it's very important to have that holistic view and have data from the beginning. Make sure you're looking at the right thing and, just be on it and measure,
And how do you balance creative freedom for influencers and brand messaging guidelines? Because that can be a tricky balance to come up with.
Yes, very. And I have my fair share of lengthy calls with clients to educate them on the process and a bit about just a bit of give and take. But I think my main point for this is, unless you have the right influencer in place, you are going to have hurdles when it comes to creative freedom. You have to have that single-minded strategy in place before you even consider what influencers you're working with. You can't do it backwards. I know so many people who will think of an influencer and then think of a campaign to involve them in. We actually do it the opposite. Think of the campaign and then slot the influencer in based on what you're trying to achieve from it. And if you find the right influencers, then the creative process is easy. We do a creative concepting process at Hotwire to limit any friction and to allow there to be a level of collaboration. The briefs, the briefing documents, the briefing calls that we have are all very seamless because they're already bought into the idea at the start. And if they're already bought into the idea, then the creative process is going to be seamless. I think it is just very much about unifying the strategy on that one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's about having that really solid, single-minded proposition up front and understanding that no matter what the campaign is, there's that one sole message that you want to get out to the audience. And then you need to put the guidelines in place to make sure that they don't say anything that you don't want them to say. But it gives them the freedom to go, as long as I come back to this one sort of North Star for the campaign, I can be as creative as I want and I can flex around that, but come back to that single-minded message every time.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, what strategies do you recommend for maximising engagement and conversions within influencer marketing campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of tactics that we can use to optimise and make sure we're getting conversion. But when it comes to driving that engagement, we're going to sound like a broken record here, but it comes back to the strategy. It's about having that bulletproof strategy up front that's grounded in data, that's grounded in genuine insight. And I think, a lot of times people think about influencer marketing and think that maybe there's a lot of judgment calls about which influencer you're going to work with, what story you're going to tell. And that's just not the case anymore. There's an incredibly sophisticated tech stack out there that allows us to make really empirical decisions about what we're going to do. We can use data to map out our audience, understand what are their motivations, what are their beliefs, what are their behaviors like, what content do they engage with, And from that, we're able to really accurately predict what's actually going to resonate with that audience. And that's why tools like Tagger are so important to us, because we're able to, at the beginning stage of the campaign, almost de-risk the strategy. So we can come in with something that's quite bold, quite creative, quite scary, but it's based on real data, real insight. And then with platforms like Tagger, we've been able to go and check, what's worked, what hasn't.
Anything to add, you guys? No, he said it all. Said it all. And then what are essential legal considerations and guidelines brands should be aware of? Because obviously you hear those nightmare stories all the time about influencers, I think much more so than other industries. But what would you say were the key kind of brand guidelines and legal considerations?
It really depends on the region you're working in. As a global agency, we have a unified contract that is modified based on the guidelines, but it is just really being, and I'm going to swear now, shit hot on the guidelines. Like, if there is changes in, the region based on what can and can't be promoted, you have to be tracking that 24 hours a day, basically. I think that, unfortunately, there are challenges with influencer marketing. You're essentially paying somebody to do a job for you, and you're reliant on them. And as much as you can, start off the process and it being fantastic and seamless, and you know that they're really invested and you're getting the output, there's always hurdles that come around, and you have to just be really agile with that. And I think that's what our team, kind of our strength is just being really agile and almost preparing for the worst in a way. I know that sounds really bad, and I don't want to put a negative spin on it, but I think if you can prepare for the worst and hope for the best, then every campaign is seamless, because you're already putting in the steps in place for those legal guidelines to be abided by. But you can't rely, unfortunately, on it has to be a role that everybody takes on. The agency, the brand, the talent, their agent. It has to be a single-minded action that they take on, because otherwise you get into the niggledy-piggledy part of who's responsible for this. And yes, guidelines say that it's the talent that's responsible for it. It's the talent that are responsible for declaring it's an ad or declaring their involvement. But then as an agency, our brands are hiring us to be responsible for making sure that happens. So it's very much a group action to take part of. I would say the biggest thing that we're noticing more and more of right now is around messaging around health in particular. I think that's probably going to be something that we see being more strict. We've seen in Australia in particular, they've become really strict on health ads. Anything around, protein shakes, medicines that are herbal, influencers aren't allowed to, promote that anymore. Whether that creeps into the UK and US is something that we're keeping an eye on. But again, I think it's about, if that does happen, how do you use influencers in a different way? How do you have them as an ambassador maybe, or involved in the early stages?
Yeah, and it changes all the time as well. Guidelines are constantly changing, especially within influencer marketing. And then the burning question is, what emerging trends do you foresee in the influencer marketing industry? And I know we've got about 1 minute, so who wants to answer this one?
We'll do a fire round. Okay.
All right, yeah, go for it.
I think it's going to be the biggest hurdle we're going to have to overcome is AI and fake imagery and fake videos. We're already seeing it. I just think it's going to become, unfortunately, a bit of a pain for influencer marketing. So that's what we're keeping an eye on at the moment.
I mean, took the words right out of my mouth. It's the topic that I'm sure everyone's been speaking about this week. But as we see this kind of incredible progress, I think we're going to see that real erosion of trust in what people think they can actually believe in when they see it. So as agencies, as industry, we really need to figure out how we overcome that, because it will be tough.
Yeah, and I think that's a tough one, especially in influencer marketing, where people are already maybe less trustworthy. It's another barrier to hurdle again.
Exactly, and we see it in the media as well. People, I think it was CNET had AI-generated content in the media, and it spat out a load of infactual coverage. So it's going to be very, very difficult, where you've got trusted institutions not being trusted anymore, institutions that are on kind of more of the fringes. How we keep that trust going forward is going to be a big challenge for all of us on this stage today.
Yep, 100%. Ines, anything to add?
No, I think that's the main topic.
They did it justice. Okay, brilliant. Is that it? Yeah, brilliant. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you very much to my wonderful clients, Hotwire, for being here. I thought that was really insightful. I hope you all agree. God, there's so many of you here. Just to say as well, I've been told, I'm under strict instructions to tell you that we've got coconuts at the Tagger bar just over there with Bacardi, if anyone would like some. So come and try my coconuts.
I'll take some.
Thank you so much to the panel.